Yeah, these are rhetorical questions.
Your name Greg? What?
What's your name?
There's no Greg.
David.
That's in German.
Good to know you. Greg.
Greg also.
You want to lecture?
This doesn't happen too often, so when it does happen.
No, please.
Do you have a Jewish name?
Post it in the chat.
Okay, so we have a very short period of time. So I want to, today, what I want to do is spend a half hour. I want to spend a half hour focusing mainly on the title page and also giving you a little bit of a map of what is supposed to be happening with Tanya, where we're going with this. I think that'll be about as much time as we have. So this, we know the Alter Rebbe wrote the title page. I know that you all have Tanya, so this is what the title page looks like, right? So you could turn to that. It's possible that many of you have already heard a little bit about the title page, but I think that if you put it into a certain context, it might be helpful to understand what the Alter Rebbe is trying to say to us. So Sefer Likutei Amorim, which is a very interesting title for Tanya, it literally means a gathering of sayings, which implies that, these are just, a bunch of sayings, let's put them all together type of thing, which is very far from the truth. Because we know that many of the things that the Alter Rebbe talks about here are big chidushim that he brought over for our generation, for his generation, and moving forward in history of time. It says like this, Chelik Rishon. Now, it's interesting that he calls this Chelik Rishon because we really know that when the Tanya first came out, it came out with two main sections. The two sections are what are known as the Likutei Amorim, which is the first 53 chapters, which we're going to talk about throughout the class today. And the second one was the philosophy of Kabbalah, which is Shari Yuchad Ve'emunah, which is all about the idea of how there's only Hashem. And it was a big question, which should be first? In other words, the avodah of working on oneself and understanding one's own soul and how your own soul works, or the study of God, right? And it was going back and forth apparently in Alter Rebbe's mind of which section should be the first section that is learned. At the end, obviously, he decided to do it this way. However, we see in a number of places in Tanya itself, he makes reference and shows that he was actually planning to do it the other way around first, i.e. the study of God first, and then the study of the self. But this is the way he did it. Now, it's called the Sefer Shel Beinani. Melukat, it says here, Melukat, it's put together, Mipi Sfarim, right, which means a bunch of books that were used. He's talking about here the Shlach Kodesh, he's talking about the Rambam, he's talking about the books of Kabbalah, the Maharal in particular, Umipi Seifrim, Kedusha Elyon, Nishmase Eden, right? And also Seifrim, also people that are authors. Obviously, he's talking about the idea of his teachers, the Baal Shem Tov, the Magid, right? And those people that came from before that time, whose souls are already in Eden. Now he says like this: Miyusad al pasuk kikar v'lach hadavra ma'od b'fichol v'avcha la'asayso. Okay. Its whole foundation is on one pasuk in Torah, which we can find in Parshas Nitzavim, which is Kikar V'Lecha. It's very close to you. Hadavar Ma'od, very, very close. This thing, Beficha, in your heart, or in your mouth, L'Vavcha, in your heart, and La'asoisa, to do. Okay, so most people have heard this phrase before, and what's really important to understand before we start the Tanya is to understand the context of this pasuk, and in particular the context of this pasuk, the way it is explained according to Kabbalah. So, if we would turn, and I know you do not have chumishes, so I will do the honors of reading the chumash for us, right, to Parashas Nitzavim, and you read the psukim that are taking place in the sixth aliyah in Parashas Nitzavim, which we read every year prior to Rosh Hashanah. It says like this: Ki mitzvah hazais, this mitzvah, Asher anochi mitzavcha hayoim, which I am connecting to you on this day, today. Now, he brings four different words here that he says it's not. First, starting with Lo nifleisi mimcha, it's not wondrous from you. Lo rechaika hi, it's not far away from you. Lo bashamayim hi, it's not in the heavens. That we're going to say, Leimar mi yaleh lanu hashamayima, who's going to go up to the heavens, v'yikacheha alanu, and it will take it for us. V'yashmi'enu oisa v'na'asena, who will teach us to us and we will do it. V'lo me'ever liyam, and it's not on the other side of the sea. Right? He lay more ki yavor lanu, who's going to go across the sea, ela ever ayam v'ikacheha, and take it lanu v'yishmenu, and teach it to us, and we can do it. Instead, ki kar v'lecha davar ma'od b'ficha levav chalas soiso. Now, if you recognize, we talked about 4 different topics here. It's not wondrous, it's not far, it's not in the heavens, and it's not on the other side of the sea. If you look at it at face value, it's like a very weird set of psukim. I mean, at least from my perspective, it is. The whole Torah is telling us facts. Do this, don't do that, right? It's telling us stories in the beginning, and then it starts with this whole thing. Don't think that this thing is like up in the heavens, that someone's going to have to go up into the heavens. It's not going to go on the other side of the ocean. Like, why would it ever come into your mind to go to the other side of the ocean? It's like, instead, no, it's very close to you. So, according to Kabbalah, what this is referring to is that there are, as we're going to see when we start breaking into the Tanya itself, there are essentially 2 different types of people in the world. Okay? There are the people who are known as tzaddikim, and they are literally made differently.
Built differently.
They're built differently. Let's put it like that. Okay, I'll go with that. They're built differently, which means like this. We know, or I hope that some of you have had the opportunity to open the Tanya. We understand every single Jew has 2 souls to them, right? They have what is known as a godly soul, and they have what is known as an animal soul or a natural soul. The godly soul is enclosed within the animal soul. The animal soul is enclosed within the body. Now, having said that, there are very few people that are in the world which are categorized as tzaddikim. Now, who are these people? These people have a tremendously powerful godly soul that when it comes down into the body, or comes down into the animal soul, it overwhelms the animal soul in an absolute manner. In a way that there is no fight. There is no argument. There is no fight the way we have an argument. In other words, we are constantly fighting with our animal souls. Our animal soul versus our godly soul. It makes us feel like we're schizophrenic in a certain way. On the one hand, we want to be here in yeshiva. On the other hand, we want to be in Tahiti enjoying the waterfalls there. Right? Why? How could you want both? Right? And that obviously, it doesn't only mean being here versus Tahiti, but it means every single day we're constantly being challenged that whether we're going to listen to our selfish self and go after the things that our ego wants to do things that are very much about what's in it for me, and our altruistic self, which is all about doing something that's godly for the sake of God. And it's a constant battle. Well, I want to tell you that there are people out there, not many, very, very few, that are called tzaddikim that don't have this issue. However, they do have other issues. So their issue is not whether they're going to put on tefillin or not. Their issue is not whether they're going to keep kosher or not. Their issue is not whether they're going to push on that button in the internet, which we all know we shouldn't be doing, right? That's not their issue. But what this section of Torah is talking about is that there are 4 main areas in a person that need to be refined when we look at the actual person himself. Those areas are his emotions, his intellect, his what we call ratzon, or his will, and his pleasure. Okay? These 4 areas are much more closely related to the essence of who he is and what he is. Now, we all are working on them, but that is not the major work of a regular human being. Tzaddikim, they are not challenged by the same things that we are challenged by, but what they do have to do is they have to look with a fine-tooth comb. Is that a right phrase?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? To be with a candle? No? Okay. So to be able to find, is there any aspect in my emotions that is in any way egotistical? Is in any way not godly? And they look inside themselves to such an extent, like it says about the Alter Rebbe, that when he first came back from Mezrich, and we know that the idea of doing Bedikas Chametz, which is the checking for Chametz the night before Pesach, it's actually a metaphor for we're supposed to be looking in ourselves and trying to find the Chametz, the ego in ourselves and to get rid of it. And it's told about him that he had his candle and he had lived in what we would call in modern day language a studio apartment, and he spent the entire night 12 hours looking for chametz. It takes me about 5 minutes, it takes me about 1 second to find chametz, but in myself. But I mean, what does it mean? It means that a tzaddik has to start off by purifying his emotions to the absolute extreme. After he's purified all of his emotions, he has to purify his intellect. After he's purified every aspect of his intellect, he has to purify his ratzon. That everything he's doing has to be in a way of mesirus nefesh, of total self-sacrifice for God. And only after he's done that, he has to then purify his actual pleasure aspect or center in him, in his soul.
Different hierarchy?
He goes a hierarchy, yep. Emotion, intellect, ratzon, pleasure. After he's done all that, then he is on the pathway of becoming a complete tzaddik. So what God is telling us here is that is an avoda, but that's not our avoda. We have to understand what are the real goalposts for you and me. And this is what the Tanya is coming to share with us for the first time in history, that it's not the same goalposts for every single person. A tzaddik's goalposts look very different than our goalposts. And when you recognize that, it changes the whole game. Because you know that all of a sudden what I'm supposed to be trying to do, what I'm supposed to be trying to aim at, what I'm supposed to actually accomplish. And when I recognize what I can accomplish and what my goals are, so all of a sudden things change. In other words, if I'm trying to shoot from 20 feet out, it's very different from shooting from 1 foot out. Very, very different story. So if you don't know the goalposts, then you're playing the wrong game. So that's why the Alter Rebbe starts by saying, listen, boys, I have to tell you, up until now, you've been looking at Kabbalah, you've been looking at Musar. Well, there was no Musar in that time, but the old-fashioned Musar from the original, from the Rishonim, right? You've been looking at these ethical books, but most of the things that they've been talking about are aimed for the few tzaddikim of every generation. That's not for you, and that's not for me. So instead, what is our goal? All of a sudden, he says something very different. That now we have to understand what is our purpose, what is our soul's purpose in being in this world, is to focus on 3 garments, which he's going to introduce to us in the 4th chapter of Tanya. These 3 garments, starting with action. Action is the easiest thing to control. I don't have to punch the guy next to me, even though I want to. I can control myself. Sometimes my chavrusa makes me really mad. Doesn't work that way. The next thing that we have to work on, which is much more difficult, is our speech. We want to say this thing. We want to speak negatively. We want to be talking about this other person. Did you hear what happened? We want to gossip. We want to let it out. You have to be able to control yourself. You have to be able to control what you say. One second. And then finally, we have to start to control our thought, which is obviously the hardest of everything. We were talking about today in Hasidus class about how even science says 49% of the time that we're constantly going back to the default mechanism of our brain, which is a negative default. That's science says, not us, right? This is what Hasidus would say about that is very much along the same lines. Our default is negative. Our default is that we're going up an escalator and it's going down. As soon as you stop, if you're walking up the escalator, it's going to pull you down. So unless you're unconsciously being aware of what it is that you're thinking about, you're just going to go back to the default mechanism in your brain. And that's why people fall into these depressions constantly. Because you have to outright be changing that thought. Right? And one of the things that we're going to be talking about throughout Tanya is how do I change that thought? Okay. What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to approach it? But the first step of this whole story, the Alter Rebbe is saying right here in the title page, is let's get the goalposts right. Before we could even talk about Judaism, just talk about what the goalposts are. right? If you think the goalposts are that I'm going to be disgusted by, let's say, again, pushing on that button in the internet that I shouldn't be doing, or eating that not kosher food, which I really want to be eating, it's not going to happen. Because that's not realistic in my life. But what is realistic is I could choose not to push that button. I could choose not to eat that food. I could choose not to say those negative things. But I want to. You're right. A tzaddik doesn't even want to. A tzaddik is holding on that level that he can uproot that from, but that's not what I'm supposed to be working on. So knowing what I'm supposed to be working on is the foundation of the whole Tanya. So now that I know what I'm supposed to be working on, so now I can move forward. Now I can know, and now I can move forward with my whole life. And I can recognize that, you know what? When I'm going to be 120 years old, God willing, and I'm going to still have the same taiva to do the same stupid thing, I'm not going to look at myself as being a failure, because that's why I was created. And it even says so in chapter 27 in Tanya. It says, you could have the same taiva every single day, to do the same stupid thing every single day. And you wake up every morning and you say, I can't believe I'm going to want to do the same dumb thing again and again and again. I haven't accomplished anything. I've been frum for at least 3 minutes. I've been frum for 3 months. I've been frum for 3 years. I've been frum for 30 years. And I still have the same taiva. I'm not any better than I was 3 minutes ago, 30 years ago, whatever it is. The answer is, that's not the goal. Because maybe God is giving you that to turn that over every single day of your life. That's the goal. So the first step, according to Chassidus, is you have to know what the goal is. Before you know what the goal is, you're just going to be lost. So now the Alter Rebbe is setting out for us the goal. Okay? Hold on. We had a few questions, and then we could, David, you were first, right?
Yes. It sounded like you were saying that a tzaddik has to work to become a tzaddik. I thought a tzaddik is just born tzaddik.
Well, it's a very good point. The tzaddik does have to work to become a tzaddik, and a tzaddik is born to be a tzaddik, which means like this, that, it's more a matter of, a tzaddik is born a tzaddik, but within the world of tzaddikim, there is a huge amount of work that needs to take place. In other words, just like in our world of the regular person, right, there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done, right? In the tzaddik's world, there is a huge amount of work as well. Now, he's not fighting about eating kosher or not kosher. He's not fighting about breaking Shabbos or not breaking Shabbos. He's fighting with his inside about all different minuscule little things that might be off.
Hi.
What?
Example?
An example that he's doing the mitzvahs, and he has a little bit of a feeling of that he's going to get a schar from this mitzvah.
Oh.
That's off. That's he's not doing it for God. So he's doing the mitzvah. It was never a question whether he's going to do the mitzvah or not, but there's a little bit of a me inside there. That's a whole, he's off. So is he, I'm sorry? He's still a tzaddik. He's not questioning whether he should do a mitzvah or an avera.
Okay.
But within that little, there's a little bit of me there. Or that there's a little bit of me in the pleasure. Or there's a little bit of, and obviously amongst the tzaddikim, there's huge gamut of different possibilities. But that's not where we are. We have to focus on where we are. We are in a realm that says, I want to eat this not kosher food. And I'm going to control myself. Now, we could be a tzaddik on a certain level. In other words, there are areas in my life that maybe I wasn't always, but I could tell you right now, I could say that I'm a tzaddik on that level. In other words, if someone were to bring in front of myself a double cheeseburger with bacon on it, I think I would probably throw up. I mean, I'm pretty disgusted by the whole idea of eating such a thing like that. But that doesn't mean I'm a tzaddik. But in this area, then you could say I'm a tzaddik. On the other hand, if someone brought along, maybe something else that I was like, right? In that area, I'm very... And then there's other things that, okay, so I remember, for example, I remember a bacher that came here once, and, when he was first here, when he would walk through Morristown, he would have to walk on the other side of the street, so he shouldn't have to walk past the pizza store, because he had such a desire to go in and have a pepperoni pizza. This is where he's holding. Over the course of time, it changes with people. In certain areas, yes. Certain areas, no. Certain things, you still have a taiva maybe 50 years later. You start listening to, whatever. That's the way it is.
Jet ski down.
Okay, question, Avram.
Back to you saying about controlling speech.
Yes.
Sometimes people say that it's good to let things out, right? So not to keep things inside. So somebody might be hurting you, and you might need to talk about it to somebody else.
It's a very good point. The question is how and where and when.
In the context of like
Right. In other words, there's always I would say there is usually a way of handling things that doesn't have to be coming directly from my nefesh bahamis as a reaction. In other words, someone's bothering me, and I want to let him have it, and I have to get it out of my system. It's probably not the best way.
No.
But maybe, in a different arena, in a different setting, speaking about it with that person could be very positive. So that's what we're talking about. Yeah. You had a question also?
I was thinking about I have a question, but I don't know if it's the time to ask it.
Okay, so let's go further. Let's go. I want to at least do one more line. That way. Okay, so then he says, and we're already at 4:00. It was went very quickly. Lever hativ, to explain very well. Echu karav ma'od. So this is a very important point, that this idea of Yiddishkeit is actually karav ma'od. It's very close to everyone. Okay, so this is not something that is that God is putting in front of us, something that is impossible. This is something that everyone can do, right? And then he says, "B'derech harucha v'ktzara be'ezras Hashem yisbarach," in a longer, shorter way. Now, this is a pun on the Gemara of when one of the Tanaim was going to Yerushalayim, and he asked the kid, and he said, which is the way to Yerushalayim? And he says, do you want to take the longer, shorter way, or the shorter, longer way, right? The famous story. And obviously he says the Shah, which is the main word. So when he heard shorter, longer way, so he went that way. And of course he started going, and there was this huge, vineyards and all these things in the way that he couldn't do anything about, and he couldn't ever get there. So it looked like he saw Yerushalayim, but he couldn't get there. The longer, shorter way was like, yes, it's much longer and it's a wavy path, but you can eventually get there. Now, in general, Chabad Hasidus is known as the longer, shorter way versus Chagas Hasidus. Chabad Hasidus is characterized as, the theory behind it is, first of all Hasidus is all about turning on the emotions, which means turning on two particular emotions, love and fear. But it doesn't mean love, I love you, let me count the ways, and fear, I'm shaking in my boots. It's love is like an excitement for Hashem, an excitement for Yiddishkeit, an excitement to learn, excitement for mitzvahs, that's like a love. Fear is also taking Yiddishkeit seriously. When it says, look, when you wake up in the morning, someone asked me before Negelbasser, you're supposed to wash your hands, so you take it seriously. In the morning, you wake up and you wash your hands. It's like, but why? Doesn't matter why. That's why you do it. This is what you do. You take it serious. If it says on Shabbos you don't do this, so we don't do this. This is it. You take it like this is the real deal. It's not because there's a policeman looking and that's why I'm not going to speed. In other words, everyone that I know would be driving, 80 miles an hour, 90 miles an hour if they knew that there were no police and there was no radar on the road. Because there's radar, therefore, they're going to drive 65. Which means what? They don't really believe in the concept of a speed limit. They just don't want to get caught.
No,
right?
no.
If you believed in the concept of a speed limit, for whatever reason they made a speed limit, because of safety, because of the environment, because of whatever tickles your fancy, right? Then you wouldn't need a policeman there, or like even in, now in New York, they have cameras and they literally send you in the mail. It's like impossible to drive there, right? You get tickets one after the other. I don't know if any other developed nations have these exciting things like we do. But the point being that if you believed in the concept, that you took it seriously, then you don't need a policeman there. That's what is called arousing fear. Means that you take it seriously. If God says that we put on tefillin in the morning, then we put on tefillin in the morning. Because why? Because we know it's the right thing to do. Because God said it's the right thing to do. Now, the question is, how do I get this going in myself? According to Chabad, it's called Chabad. Chabad stands for Chachma Bina Das, which is the intellectual aspects of the soul. the idea is that if you can meditate on the concept in your brain and think through it, you can reframe for yourself in your mind why I should be excited about Yiddishkeit, about God, why I should take it seriously, and that should arouse your emotions. That's the basic concept of Chabad Hasidus, okay? Which is different from what is known as Chagas Hasidus. Chagas Hasidus is the more the Polish Hasidus, which is much more about starting with doing, with more of an emotional type of arousal,
That's like
and
Nahum?
not so much like what?
Like Nahum Breslov?
Like Braslov, yeah, exactly. That's more focused on trying to emotionally get you going, which we believe is actually a shorter way. It could actually make it work even better very quickly, but we believe that it's a longer way that it won't necessarily change. But if you can get to the point in yourself where you're really thinking through these ideas in a Chabad way, then it will be a slower process, and ultimately you can change the way you view the world, and your perspective can change on life. And that's really the goal moving forward. Okay? Now, having said that, in Chabad Hasidus, there are two main directions of how we're supposed to do this. I'm out of time.
I think we started a little bit late, so can we go a little bit later?
Although we have more time, it's okay, Rabbi.
Okay, I'll just quickly cover this, and then we'll pick up from here tomorrow because I think it's important.
It's only 8.
That
it's only 8:02.
it's only 10 after 8, right?
In the morning.
Chassidus Seder, right? Anyway, the idea is in chapters 1 through 17. 1 through I'm gonna come back to this. I'm gonna come back to this tomorrow. I'm gonna say it in a short way because I don't want to take time from. He flew all the way in from Chicago. It's not nice. So the kitzur is like this: 1 through 17 is the holistic way of becoming a Beinani, of becoming the perfect person. What is a Beinani? A Beinani, the average person, as he calls it here, is Superman. It is absolutely Superman. Why? Because he is a person who is in complete control of himself 24/7. Try being in complete control of yourself for 30 seconds.
No.
Very hard to do. 24/7. That's what a Beinani is. A Beinani is in complete control of what, though? Of his actions,
The 3 guards.
his thoughts, and his speech and his thoughts, right? That's what he's in control of. But he's in control always. He's always in control of himself. The chapters up until 17 discuss how to holistically change in oneself in order to become that type of person. However, we have a big problem because this is a lifetime of work. So what do I do now when I'm about to push the button on my... That's 18 through 25. 18 through 25 is the short way. That I need something to hold me, to help me right now, a Tylenol, to fix the problem. It's not going to fix anything really, right? It's just going to be a temporary fix. But I need it sometimes. If I could tap into that, then at least I could save myself, right? That's 18 through 25. 26, what we're learning in the morning in my Hasidus class, that's what happens when it's not working. What happens? Why is it not working? If it's not working, it means, the Alter Rebbe says, you're not in a state of happiness, of joy. Everything in Yiddishkeit has to be done in a state of joy. If it's not done in a state of joy, you cannot win. You cannot win over Yetzirah. Impossible. But the Alter Rebbe starts, and we're going to conclude with this point because I want to give Yonatan a chance. But don't think that joy and happiness is a reward. It's an avoda. It's an effort. It's work. Happiness is something that you work at, not a result as a reward of something that you get. That is a very important point. And that is what's behind, that's what fuels the whole story. Okay? So we're going to pick up from here tomorrow, Amir Hashem.
26 to
26 through 34.